What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How's everybody doing? I hope that you're doing well. Listen, today we finally have the tier list video coming back. Round 2, baby. I did one of these about a month and a half ago, maybe longer, which doesn't sound like a very long amount of time to be doing tier lists, but the point is, a lot has changed in a month and a half, or a month, whatever long it was. We went from patch 9.1 to patch 9.2, which has had some significant changes to Enhancement Shaman. On top of that, we've got double legendaries and tier sets. I think we kind of had double legendaries back then, but we have everything now. You know, actually, we didn't have double legendaries back then. I'm crazy. Yeah, so there's been a massive swing in terms of what could potentially happen to all of the builds, because we used to have no double legendaries, no tier set, and no changes to enhance. And now we have changes to enhance, like Lava Lash being spreading Flame Shock, which did not happen at the beginning of this expansion, if you remember that, if you can remember that far back. So there's that. Double legendaries, right? The Covenant legendaries plus regular ones. And then the tier set bonuses all coming in. That's been the final piece. So we need to revisit this. We need to revisit this and take a look and see what has changed. What might be better now? What's worse? Did any of my predictions come true at all? Probably not, right? So here's the old tier list picture. I'll come back to this later, but you can see where we kind of lined everything up. We did have all these categories. So things like Burst AOE, Strong Sustained AOE, Single Target plus AOE, Best Single Target Funnel, Best Week 1, right? I think this was just as double legendaries were going to be coming. We didn't have them yet, but we were getting them right as I made this tier list. So that is that list. Now you can see I've changed the categories here. We have Burst AOE, we have Strong Sustained AOE, we have Best Single Target, we have Funnel. Then we've got Resto Shammy, Off Heals, Unforch. So really it's these top 4 that you're looking for. If you're talking about DPS, I am going to go over Enhancement Shaman and LE Shaman, and I've got obviously Resto Shammy has its own little category because there's only a couple things that really work for Resto Shammy. So this is the new list. We got rid of a couple categories. I got rid of Single Target plus AoE, and I got rid of Best Week 1 because it's not Week 1 anymore. The Single Target plus AoE was just kind of like a meh category. It sort of represented the best overall combination of legendaries and all that kind of stuff. So I just got rid of it because it's sort of redundant. I'm going to talk about that in this video, but grab your coffee and let's get into it, okay? I do have all my icons here. Once again, you can see that I've got them here. And I have little black squares that I've made up that will represent the spaces in between different builds, okay? So that we can keep it all separate. So let's get into this. I want to talk about first our Burst AoE category at the top. And again, I'm going to explain sort of my reasoning behind why these things have stayed the same or gotten better or gotten worse. So in our old prediction, we had... This is actually the biggest swing ever. So in the old prediction, we had the Enhancement Shaman Deeply Rooted Elements down here in the Unforch category, and I'm going to put it all the way up here in the Burst AoE. Remember, this does not mean that, this is better than this. We're not doing a linear tier set like that. Like some people just have like best all the way down to like worst. That's not the point here. These are specific categories, and they have specific goals in mind. I did have this down as Unforch because it really was Unforch earlier in the expansion when we had no double legendaries, no tier set bonus, and our stats were really low. Like our haste values were really low. Now all that has changed. So I'm going to put this up here and I'm going to pair with it Necrolord. This is the first build that I think is very, very good for Burst AoE. I think for Enhancement Shaman, if you guys saw in one of my latest videos, if you're watching this sort of in the future, then you'll just have to go back a couple of videos. But I did a video, a plus 20 Mists of Tyrannus Scythe with Deeply Rooted Elements Necrolord as Enhancement Shaman. I did that. And we had moments in that video where I was doing like 60, 70k AoE damage, like for a little bit of time on a pack. And so I want to put this in the Burst AoE category because I do think that you can basically run into a huge AoE pack and you can pop Ascendance and you can go crazy with this build as you sort of used to do with like a Doomwind style build, right, where you would take Ascendance in Season 1. Now we don't really take Doomwinds at all. I'm going to show you where that ends up later, hint, hint. But I do think that Deeply Rooted actually has some merit here. The biggest reason is because the 4-piece tier set bonus gives your dogs a chance to proc Stormbringer for you. So all the dogs that you're creating have a chance to give you a reset on your Storm Strike or your Wind Strike in this case. In this build, you want to be pressing Storm Strike as much as humanly possible. Just press it all the time. And the fact that the dogs give you a reset on Storm Strike means that that's much more possible than it used to be before you had tier set bonuses. On top of that, our haste values are really, really high now. We can get them really high because all of our secondary stats are like as high as they can ever be now. All right, so you can get up to like 35-40% haste if you want to, but I'm hovering around 32, I think, maybe 34% with this build. It feels really good. It means that the cooldown on Storm Strike is low. Your ability to press it is very, very high. So as with most expansions, Enhancement Shaman tends to get better near the end of an expansion, and this particular build, Deeply Rooted, gets really, really good. With the Necrolord edition, you can do all the cleaving lightning bolts, and you get up to like 40, 50, 60% more haste, which again, as I just mentioned, is really good for this build because it allows you to spam Storm Strikes and turn those Storm Strikes into Wind Strikes when you get the proc. So I genuinely think that Deeply Rooted now has a place in the Enhancement Shaman build guide. I just did a plus 20 Miss Saturna's Scythe with it, and we timed it with like 4 or 5 minutes to spare. So I think it works. I think it works very well, and it deserves to have a spot here. Moving over to the Elemental Shaman for Burst AoE, of course, we're looking at Echoes of the Great Sundering plus Necrolord. I don't think anybody thought that this was going to change. This build is still extremely strong. I didn't actually personally test this one, but I've watched videos of other people who've done a bunch of different videos of Ellie Shamans. This is still like the premier build for Burst AoE. So you get into a pack, maybe the tank pulls like 15 or 20 mobs together if you can handle that many, and you pop Lust and you just go crazy, and this thing will give you insane Burst AoE because of the way that the Echoes of the Great Sundering gets buffed. The Earthquake obviously having a huge amount of damage now. So yeah, it's just very strong, and you get all the haste bonuses from the Necrolord Covenant, of course. And I think that the other way that you could also build this is to put Night Fae here. So I think either one of these works. I think that if you just want to get the standard sort of Burst AoE combo going on, then this build still works really well as Night Fae. Echoes of the Great Sundering plus Night Fae, right? So you get your Maelstrom all stacked up, then you do Fae Transfusion. It gives you 24% more crit. And then you have your Storm Elemental just blasting, and you're dropping huge Earthquakes that do like double damage and are critting all the time. This is the premier way, I think, to play this build. It has huge Burst AoE potential. I think the Necrolord is sort of another way to play it as well. But that's what you want to be doing. So that's the Burst AoE category. It actually hasn't changed. I sort of made a little addition here on the Night Fae thing, but it hasn't really changed otherwise. Okay? Now, let's move to Strong Sustained AoE. This is like the biggest category of them all, and I think that it's really shows how the Enhancement Shaman has changed from Season 1 to Season 2. I think that Season 1 was all about Doomwinds, but had these like big burst windows, right? These 1-minute windows where you did a whole bunch of damage. The Strong Sustained damage is now the name of the game for Enhancement Shaman, and it really has taken over the meta. The biggest, most prevalent build you are ever going to see for Enhancement Shaman is Primal Lava Actuators plus Necrolord. This build right here is the #1 build for any Mythic Plus, basically, at all. And that's because it is able to create strong, sustained AoE. You run in there, because of the changes to Lava Lash, spreading Flame Shock now, it makes it so easy to just run in, you press Primordial Wave or Flame Shock, then you spread it around to 4 other people, then you maybe Primordial Wave a 5th target, however you want to set that up. You have 5 Flame Shocks all ticking, buffing your Lava Lash, and then you have Hot Hand procs and Fire Nova, and it's a very simple rotation. Flame Shock, spread it around, detonate it with Fire Nova. That's what you do. And then you're just cashing in on all this Flame Shock damage that's going out, that's buffing your Lava Lash. When I mean sustained AoE damage, you're going to take the Lashing Flames talent, right, which doubles the damage of your Flame Shocks when you tag something with Lava Lash. Of course, you can tag everything with Lava Lash because you're running Primal Lava Actuators, which reduces the cooldown of Lava Lash. If you get a Hot Hand proc, you just start tab targeting through enemies, getting that sort of spread, sustained AoE damage that you're looking for. It's very, very good. On almost every pack, you can pull 25 to 30k DPS. Like, that's what you can do with this build. And at this point in the expansion, that's pretty strong. So that's the premier, like, strong, sustained AoE damage. Now, there's other ways to build it, though. I think there's an honorable mention here to be given to Venthyr with Primal Lava Actuators. I think it's very, very good because the Venthyr legendary effect says that your Flame Shock crits reduce the cooldown of Chain Harvest, right? So you start a pack and you just press, well, you don't press Chain Harvest off the bat. You want to get your Maelstrom weapon stacks built up. But you run in, you do Flame Shock into Lava Lash, spread it around, build up some Maelstrom weapon stacks, and then boom, hit the whole pack with a huge Maelstrom-infused Chain Harvest, which does a ton of damage on its own. And then all of your Flame Shock critical ticks reduce the cooldown of Chain Harvest and get the cooldown back very, very quickly. So this is another build that's very similar. You run the exact same setup as Necrolord. You're going to run Lashing Flames, Hot Hand, Fire Nova. It's the same setup. It does a lot of strong AoE sustained damage as well. It's just that instead of getting this haste buff, you're getting a big burst of damage from Chain Harvest, and that's giving you it's also giving you a lot of off healing, but it cools down Chain Harvest very quickly. All your Flame Shocks are working to do that. So that's the next one I want to say. Then I do think that this build is very strong. I think actually I'm going to switch the places of these builds here. We're going to do this really quick. Boom, 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 boom. I should have done this earlier, but I do think that priority-wise, Skybreakers for Enhancement Shaman is better than just taking Primal Lava Actuators plus Venthyr. I think that Skybreakers plus Venthyr, in terms of strong, sustained AoE, I think Skybreakers is huge. It's really, really good. So the reason why is because Skybreakers gives your Flame Shocks 50% more crit, right? So they reduce the cooldown of Chain Harvest much, much quicker than the PLA version does. So you basically run into a pack, do your regular combo, get a huge Chain Harvest off with a Maelstrom weapon stack Chain Harvest, and then the cooldown of Chain Harvest goes from a minute and a half down to like 20 seconds. Sometimes down to 15 seconds if you can get that 6th Flame Shock out there, if you're really good at it. So like a 15 to 20 second Chain Harvest is nuts, as opposed to the PLA version would have like a 30 to 35 second Chain Harvest, maybe longer. Unless your natural crit is just very high, which I know a lot of people in my comments have talked about them just having naturally high crit, plus the Skybreakers crit. It means that they have like 90% crit for their Chain Harvest, which means the Chain Harvest is like a 10-second cooldown. It's absurd what you can do with this build. So strong sustained AoE damage comes from your Flame Shocks and from your Chain Harvest cast. You can cast so many Chain Harvests with this build, and you get 50% more crit on your Flame Shocks. That's why it's so good in strong sustained AoE situations. So again, it is capped at 6 targets, so I understand that's why it's not in the burst AoE category. This is kind of like the uncapped AoE burst category. That's why this is up here. This is not uncapped AoE, but it's strong, consistent, pack to pack to pack, sustained AoE damage, and it actually does fine even when you have up to like 10 or 12 targets. It might sound like it doesn't do fine, but it does. So that's that build. Moving right along, we've got 2 more builds for this category. I know that sounds insane, but we're going to have Ellie Shaman with Skybreakers and Venthyr. It's the same thing. I don't think it's as good as the Enhance version at all, because Enhance can spread Flame Shocks with Lava Lash. Elemental Shaman cannot. Elemental Shaman has to rely basically purely on the Chain Harvest cast. You cast Chain Harvest on pull with your Fire Elemental out. They have this extra little wrinkle with Fire Elemental, right? So for Elemental Shaman, you cast your Fire Elemental, then you cast Chain Harvest. It spreads all these Flame Shocks. The Fire Elemental makes your Flame Shocks tick 25% faster, and it doubles the duration of your Flame Shocks. So it means that they last for like the entire pack. The duration of the entire pack, basically. Because instead of them lasting 18 seconds, they last 36 seconds. which is definitely long enough. Like, that's as long as any AoE pack is going to last, right? Even on higher keys, packs don't even quite last that long. So it's a cool little difference where you get your Fire Nova out and then you pop Chain Harvest, and then you just watch the cooldown of Chain Harvest go down really quickly. All your Flame Shocks have 50% crit. They do damage 25% faster, and they last twice as long as they normally would. So some really cool, it's a really neat thing that Elemental Shaman can do. It's a different sort of take on the whole build, but I still think that the enhancement version is much, much better because you can spread your Flame Shocks all on your own. So finally, we're going to go with, I think it's just going to create another row all on its own. The last one I want to mention is the Deeply Rooted Elements tech for, oh, I have to do it here. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oops. This needs to go right here. And then we go here. I got it, guys. Don't worry. Deeply Rooted Elements plus Venthyr. I think actually other people have also mentioned they like the Deeply Rooted Elements on Elemental Shaman with Necro, and people have said that it's better. I think that there's a good, you could swap these two around. Like, I think that the haste that you get from this is probably better with Deeply Rooted. Okay, don't get me wrong. But I do think that getting the 5 Flame Shocks for free on Ellie Shaman is pretty helpful, right? Because you can't spread Flame Shocks naturally. But this build, obviously, is all about the Ascendance proc on Ellie Shaman. And the Ascendance proc, if you don't know, when you proc Ascendance, it'll send Lava Lashes, it'll send Lava Bursts at all enemies, right, that have your Flame Shock on them. So with Necrolord, you go Flame Shock, and then you go Primordial Wave into a second target, and then you just start casting your Lava Bursts, hoping to get a proc. And then you can continue to spread Flame Shocks as you see fit, and you'll have a better opportunity when this thing does go off that it's going to proc and hit everybody with your Flame Shock. So big meatballs going everywhere. Now, the Venthyr way is simply to, again, cast your Fire Elemental, cast Chain Harvest, and then you have 5 Flame Shocks out for free. All those Flame Shocks have double duration, and then you just try to proc. Every time you get a Lava Surge proc, you send out a Lava Burst, and you're hoping to cash in on this proc. And if you do get it, it just sends meatballs at all of those Flame Shocks. So it's very cool. It's a very, very cool build. I like it. And I think that most of you guys in the comments have talked about Necrolord being the better way to do it, and I think I agree with you. The Venthyr way is just kind of has a really cool burst to it, but the Necrolord way is perfectly fine because you get all the haste on top of that. So that's the strong sustained AoE section. I know that took a little bit of time, but that's the biggest section. It's the biggest section for a reason. I think that Enhance's AoE damage has gotten way better over the course of this expansion. Way better. PLA plus Necrolord, I think that's still the best one. Skybreakers with, enhanced Skybreakers with Venthyr, very, very strong. It's a very good build. It also can get up to 25, 27k sustained AoE damage, up to 30k in a couple of instances. So it's like right on par with the PLA Necrolord one. I think the PLA Necrolord one is a bit better overall, especially on like bosses and stuff. But if you're doing like a fortified Mythic Plus week, these two builds are really, really good. And then these other 3 are also strong, but not quite as good as these first 2. But they're all good for strong sustained AoE damage, pack to pack to pack. You're going to be doing lots of damage. Okay, let's move into single target. Of course, we got Witch Doctor Wolfbones plus Night Fae. That would be the premier single target build here. So, of course, this is for something like raid bosses. This is what I used for all of my raid bosses, and it's the premier one that you're going to want to go to. There's very, very few exceptions. If you just have a single target boss, then this is the way to go. So if you're doing like Prototype Pantheon or even the first boss Guardian, those are like, they have a lot of AoE to them. And they're not, you can use something like PLA. But if you're doing like the Jailer or Rygalon or Halandris, those bosses all are pure single target. They're going to require the Witch Doctor Wolfbones plus Night Fae setup. So it's very, very good, and it's going to do everything that you want it to. It's a pretty solid build there for sure. So that's the best one. I think also on some Tyrannical weeks in Mythic Plus, this is okay to bring, but generally speaking, there's better builds for sure, even on Tyrannical. For Ellie Shaman, Of course, I do think that the Wind Speaker's Lava Resurgence plus Night Fae is very, very strong as well. This is sort of the premier Ellie Shaman build for raids. I think it's going to be very, very good for you. I think you can also take Echoes of the Great Sundering because it actually does quite well. But I kind of hate that style if you're trying to do single target damage. So I do think that Wind Speakers pulls ahead a little bit, especially with the tier set bonus now for Ellie Shaman, really focusing hard on Lava Burst. It just buffs the damage to Lava Burst like crazy, right? 20% from the tier set bonus, and then it reduces the cooldown of your Ellie. But doubling down on the Lava Burst trend, you can take Wind Speakers, which gives you that Lava Surge proc for free, and also gives you more damage on Lava Burst again. So I think that this is the best single target that you're going to think about in terms of a raid scenario. So those are the best two, I think, for single target. I've gotten rid of the category that was single target plus AoE because I think that most of the builds in the strong sustained AoE section are going to accomplish that for you, including some of the burst guys up here. But these are really just your best builds overall in Mythic Plus. Let's just say that. So the strong sustained AoE ones I think are going to be your best ones in Mythic Plus. There is some honorable mention for Witch Doctor Wolfbones on Tyrannical weeks in Mythic Plus that you could run this with maybe, Necrolord. You could do this and do a more balanced build in a Mythic Plus environment because you can still spread your Flame Shocks, get the Lightning Bolt cleave from Necrolord, and then have lots of dogs out at the same time. So there is something to be said there. I think that's a decent way to run Tyrannical weeks for Mythic Plus. Some stuff that I'm going to keep experimenting with, but generally speaking, these are your best Mythic Plus builds right here in the middle here, okay? So now, I'm going to just talk about Funnel really quickly because the best build that we have, I think, in general is PLA plus Necrolord, and that basically continues to be the trend here for Funnel. This build can do strong sustained AoE damage where you take Lashing Flames and Fire Nova, right? And you're like tab targeting through enemies, getting the Lashing Flames debuff out. You can obviously play that way, and that's how you're going to play whenever you're doing AoE damage in Mythic Plus. But in Mythic Plus as well, if you want to funnel all of that damage into one target, you can still do that with this build, with either one of these Covenants here. I think Necrolord is the way to go. So instead of tab targeting through enemies to get all that big AoE damage going, you can just funnel one target. So all those Flame Shocks that you've spread are all ticking, and they're buffing your Lava Lash, and then you're funneling all that Lava Lash damage into one target, one priority target. So this is something that Enhancement Shaman has always been able to do. We've always been pretty good at it, but this is like very, very good. This is the best way to do it, I think. You spread all your Flame Shocks around. You get your cleaved Lightning Bolt out there with your Necrolord. Now you have like 50% more haste, and then you just funnel all your Lava Lashes into one target, and they keep getting buffed, and they keep doing tons of damage. So that's something you can do. That's why I think this is the best build overall for Mythic Plus, the PLA plus Necrolord, because it can do strong sustained AoE damage as well as doing funnel at the same time. So that's just a sort of honorable kind of mention there. But this is, I think, the premier build that you're going to want to look for is PLA plus Necrolord. It just can do all of the things that we want it to do. And at this point in the expansion, we're able to get, our stats are better, so we can get tons of mastery, which really buffs all the fire damage that we're doing. And on top of that, the dogs that we're getting from our tier set bonus can be buffed by the Elemental Spirits talent that we're taking, which you almost everybody has to take that talent basically now because of the tier set bonus. So you can have a whole bunch of fire dogs out, buffing your fire damage by 20% once again, which just doubles down on how this build works. So that's that there. Let's jump over to Resto Shammy really quick, get all this stuff done. This hasn't really changed. My prediction is basically the exact same as it was before. You're going to run these two builds here. So I think that you can run the Deep Tremor Totem is the best legendary in Mythic Plus for Resto Shammy. I like it just is. There's nothing better than this. And I think you really should pair it up with Kyrian, because Kyrian, I think, does the most healing and the most damage for Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman's able to take advantage of the double dipping that the Vesper Totem does, right? You cast 3 damaging spells, and it does a huge proc of damage and healing. Then you cast 3 healing spells, and it does a huge proc of damage and healing once again. You take Mechanicos for your Soulbind, and you have a 40-second cooldown, basically, on the Kyrian Totem all the time. So it's very, very strong, and it's paired up with the Earthquake legendary for the Earth Elemental. Every 5 minutes, you have like a ridiculous combo where you're able to do like sometimes 15, 16k DPS if the pack's big enough, if you drop Vesper Totem and Deep Tremor. So very, very good for Mythic Plus. I think there's an honorable mention here to be made for Skybreakers plus Venthyr, because Skybreakers, it just gives your Flame Shocks 50% more crit, and that reduces the cooldown of your Chain Harvest. And now you're using your Chain Harvest not just for a DPS button, which it is very good, but you're using it as one of your best healing buttons that you have, because it hits like an absolute bust. It'll full heal your whole team if it crits. So you can basically cheat some extra healing out of Chain Harvest by getting 50% more crit on your Flame Shocks when you cast this. So you cast... you start with the Chain Harvest, get the Flame Shocks out there. They reduce the cooldown of your Chain Harvest to make it like a 20-second cooldown. So then you're doing all your other, your regular rotation where you're just healing people, trying to do as much damage as you can. You're getting all this passive damage from the Flame Shocks doing a lot of crits, right, from critting all the time. And then if your team is almost dead, the cooldown of Chain Harvest comes back and you just full heal everybody with a huge Chain Harvest. So I actually really enjoy this style on Resto Shaman. I don't think it beats out Deep Tremor plus Kyrian though, but I think that it's very, very good. So the off healing, of course, is going to always be Venthyr plus Kyrian and Night Fae, and I'm missing a Night Fae thing here, but you just put this down here. These are the ones that all give off healing. The Necrolord Covenant just doesn't offer any off healing, but just to know that it's actually very, very powerful off healing, as I've been mentioning, especially Chain Harvest and the Kyrian Totem. But really, all the DPS builds that use Chain Harvest, they have incredible off healing, which is a really, really cool thing to notice. So let's get to the Unforch section. We're going to put the Kyrian Totem down here and Legacy down here, and we're going to add Doom Winds. So Legacy is really unfortunate, and we predicted this in the other video about a month ago. The tier set bonus that we're getting for Enhancement Shaman that we have now essentially replaces Legacy. It kind of does what Legacy wants to do. Legacy of the Frost Witch, if you don't know, says when you use a spender, it resets the cooldown of your Storm Strike and makes it do more damage, which is great, except that our tier set bonus with our wolves out all the time have a chance to give us Stormbringer and reset the cooldown of Storm Strike. Now, Stormbringer also buffs the damage of Storm Strike on top of resetting its cooldown. So our dogs have a 20% chance to proc that. So literally, our tier set bonus does what Legacy is trying to do, but it does it for free. It doesn't take up a legendary slot like Legacy does. So you can have your tier set bonus and take any of these other legendaries, and you essentially get the exact same bonus that Legacy is trying to give you as well. So unfortunately, it just is really redundant, I think, at this point. And I did test it a little bit, and it just doesn't feel really good. Let me just put it that way. Like, you'd rather have other damage from other sources and then just be getting your procs from the tier set bonus. The Kyrian Totem is here because Kyrian doesn't work with any of the DPS profiles here, right? It works for Resto Shaman down here. It has good off healing, but it doesn't really work as a DPS Covenant ability. So that means that's why I'm putting it in the Unforced position, because I really wish that they had changed the Vesper Totem to be a little bit more viable for the DPS guys, because you have to cast 3 healing spells to get the secondary proc on the Kyrian Totem, and you're not going to do that. You're just wasting damage, so you don't really want to do that when you're doing this. So last but not least is Doom Winds. I do want to mention that I did just try Doom Winds, as you guys probably saw a few videos ago. I think it was 2 videos ago. I did try Doom Winds with the tier set bonus with Necrolord, which I think is the best way to play it. And it just has all the same problems that it's had before. And I think that the reason that Doom Winds has really fallen out of favor is because it's really clunky to execute. Number one, you have to kind of set it up now with Necrolord. So let me steal a Necrolord one for a second. Let me just show you this. If I'm running Doom Winds plus Necrolord, I have to set up Flame Shock or Primordial Wave. Let's go Flame Shock plus Lava Lash. Now I have 4 Flame Shocks. I Primordial Wave a 5th target. So now I have 5 Flame Shocks out. Then I press my Lightning Bolt to cleave, and now I have 50% haste. Then I drop my Wind Fury Totem, and I go. And it's good. It's not bad, but that's like 4 GCDs, maybe 5 almost, of setup time, right? Let's say 4 GCDs of setup time before I get to drop my totem, and then I get to have my totem in my window, in my Primordial Wave haste window, so it's all good. I do a whole bunch of damage, but what you could have done is just set up a whole bunch of Flame Shocks during, like, in that same amount of time. I could have pressed Flame Shock, Lava Lash, Primordial Wave, Lightning Bolt, Fire Nova, and then I would have done like 30k AoE damage as PLA plus Necro. So like, you have to do all this setup to get Doom Winds going. Then you drop your Doom Winds totem and you try and do as much damage as you can. And then what happens? Maybe you get stunned. Maybe you have to step out of melee for 1 second because there's a mechanic that's going to kill you. Maybe you have to go collect your weapon, like on the first boss of the streets, like Streets of Tezavesh. You know how he steals your weapon. Like, there's all kinds of mechanics that really like mess up your rotation. And if you're in the Doom Winds window and you lose 1 second of time in the Doom Winds window, you've lost like 10% of your damage. Every second that you lose on Doom Winds, you lose incredible amounts of damage. Versus PLA plus Necro, which is just like, you're always getting the fire buff and you can spend it whenever you want. It's just, you always have damage available. You're not losing anything. If you have a couple seconds of downtime, it doesn't really affect you. If you have a couple seconds of downtime during your Doom Winds window, it ruins your damage. It just ruins it. On top of that, all the other cooldowns for Enhance don't line up with Doom Winds. Doom Winds is a 1 minute cooldown. Your Feral Spirits is a 1.5 minute cooldown. Your Primordial Wave is a 45-second cooldown. Sometimes it resets itself, and then it's even weirder. It's all out of whack. Like, all of these things don't like line up very well with the 1 minute Doom Winds window. So you're going to get that first Doom Winds window will feel really good because you lined up all your other cooldowns around your Doom Winds window. Every other time after that, it's going to feel strange because you're going to be trying to line it up. It won't always line up. Sundering is a 40-second cooldown. Like, it's really finicky. It's not very smooth. It's not very simple to execute. All the builds that are up here are very simple to execute. They're very easy to do. Skybreakers plus Venthyr is literally just spread Flame Shocks and watch them do their damage, and they're gonna do all the damage for you. PLA plus Necro is like get your Flame Shocks spread, cleave your Lightning Bolts, and then just keep pressing your Lava Lash over and over and over again, and then detonate with Fire Nova. Like, it's just super simple. You don't have to set up a Doom Winds window. You don't have to avoid all the mechanics during your Doom Winds window, or else you lose all your damage. It's been in an unfortunate position, and I'm really happy that we've moved away from it, but it's unfortunate that it sort of is so finicky to deal with. So that's it, guys. That's the tier list. These other ones down here were just extra buttons that we didn't need because we got rid of some categories. So that is the tier list right there. Hopefully I've explained them all I've explained why they deserve to be in the positions that they deserve to be in. Remember, this is not just about what's best and what's worst. I think that there are so many builds for Enhancement Shaman, and I've tried to continuously showcase that in my videos. I hope you guys can see that in these YouTube videos. I'm showcasing all of the different builds that I think are very viable moving forward. So this is my tier set list right now, my tier list, sorry, for all of the builds, and this is including double legendaries, tier set bonuses, all the stat changes that we've had over time. I think that all these builds are, I'm comfortable putting them in these different positions. So these are your best single target. These are strong sustained AoE, and that's the burst AoE. I think that these deserve to be here. So there you go, guys. That's the list. That's the video for today. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much for all the likes. Thank you for the comments. I really love all the comments down below. Let me know what you think about this tier list. Did I put these in the spot that you think that they should be in? Do you think there's a build that should go somewhere different? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's continue that conversation. Once again, drop a like on the video if you want to. I would really appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel down below. I make videos every single day on Enhancement Shaman, and I'm doing other classes now too. I'm trying to bring that content for you guys. If you haven't checked out the Patreon yet, I would also really appreciate you checking the Patreon out. And if you can donate, then I would obviously really, really appreciate that as well. Until the next one, guys, we'll see you later.